Hello and welcome to the Too Much Apparently podcast. If you're new here, this is a podcast for the deeply feeling, overthinking, emotionally overloaded humans who've been told they're too much apparently. And if you're back, thanks for choosing to sit with us again.
We're Alice and Carly, two therapists who are also just sensitive weirdos trying to make sense of life, healing, and our own brains. This isn't a professional advice podcast. It's more like the messy, honest conversations that happen when you finally feel safe enough to say what you're really thinking.
This space is for people like us, the ones who've been called too sensitive, too serious, too emotional, too intense, and have spent way too long believing that it's true.
Okay, on with the episode. Today we're talking about being too imaginative to be ordinary.
This one's for the people who've always had big inner worlds, the daydreamers, storytellers, the ones who can disappear into a book or a thought or an idea for hours.
The people who've been told they're away with the fairies or to stop daydreaming and come back to reality.
But what if imagination isn't a distraction from life?
What if it's actually one of the ways we survive it?
Today we're talking about creativity, fantasy, inner worlds, and why imagination might be one of the most underrated human strengths.
Let's get into it.
I feel like this is a big thing for you.
Yes, yeah. Do you not feel like it's a big thing for you?
I think it is, but in a more subtle way.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, where I feel like this dominates much of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. What have you been accused of? Being away with the fairies, being a daydreamer, anything like that?
Slightly differently, but when I was separating from my first husband, his mum said that I was in cloud cuckoo land.
Oh, right. That's lovely.
Which I guess came from imagining a different or better life for me than what was available in that marriage. Yeah, that was the first thing that came into my head when I read the Away with the Fairies bit. I don't think I'm so much of a daydreamer because I'm more of a ruminator. But more recently, I think for me, it's come from a disconnection from creativity. It's come from being told that I'm not a creative person or that I'm doing creativity wrong. And as I'm connecting more with being a creative person, I've done a really huge kind of, I don't even want to call it a piece of work because it makes it sound too boring, but almost like, I guess as I was reassessing my identity, my self-concept, I've created like 5 characters that represent different parts of me. I guess kind of like alter egos. But not that they ever would show up on their own. But I often think about how would this part handle this? How would this part handle this? And I've got it feels like I've got a whole world now that I've built up with these characters to try and make more sense of myself and the world. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds really fun. And I definitely know that you have a creative imagination because of the way in which you talk about things. And the way in which you present sometimes your ideas just to me in conversations or sometimes on this podcast where, the creativity of thought is evident.
Oh, that's really nice to hear. I think one of the main ways that it stands out for me is metaphor. So when I think about things, I think a lot in pictures. So I'll talk about things if someone's saying something to me, I'll often say, oh, the picture I've got in my head is da da da. That both helps me to understand it, but I think it also helps the other person to develop the idea as well, or to clarify what they mean. A bit like on the last episode where you were saying about balloons, and I was saying like, oh, for me it's more like rocks, and that works for other people.
Yeah.
But how is it for you? So this is a big part of who you are.
Yeah, I think it's the only way that I know how to operate, really. Yeah, I've always had they say a rich inner world, don't they? A rich inner world and a really active imagination. And yes, I was very much told I was being away with the fairies. My dad used to say that I lived in La La Land and I would daydream quite a lot. And I know many people have imaginary friends, but when I was very young, I had an imaginary friend that my mum used to have to also strap into the car and put food out on the table And if I had an ice cream, she had to have an ice cream, which my mum thought was maybe just a really clever way, actually, of me getting 2 ice creams.
Did you get to eat them both?
I don't know. I guess so.
Brilliant.
She just told me about it a lot. And I know her name was Dottie. But rather than, I guess, just having an imaginary friend, it was the imaginary friend was very present in a way that everybody else had to get on board and interact with said imaginary friend as well. I was always creating stories. I loved to write stories as I got older. I used to write musicals and songs, create bands in my head and do all the album artwork and things like that. I found it fun to imagine that I was in a band and this is my album artwork cover and the logo and here's the track list. And I loved coming up with names for what the album was going to be called because some of them are quite like poetic, aren't they, or clever. I used to love coming up with things like that. Also, my mum always used to talk about when people used to ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I always used to say, I either wanted to be a babysitter, work at McDonald's, or be a mermaid.
Brilliant.
And I always joke that I've done 2 out of the 3. As a teenager, I was a babysitter and I worked at McDonald's, but I am yet to be a mermaid. So I'm just waiting for the call from Disney World to come and play Ariel. And then I'll have done all 3. But yeah, there was actually something that you wrote down on our podcast preparation sheet that I thought, oh, I love that. And I feel that really describes my way of being in the world. So I'm just going to read it. You've put a little note that says, some people think in lists, some people think in worlds. I love that. And I feel like, yeah, that is true. That is true for me.
Yeah. Well, actually, as you're talking, I've got things popping into my head of things that I did when I was younger. And I'm thinking like, oh yeah, that was actually kind of creative, wasn't it? So I used to be on a diary website for teenagers and I set up a club and I think it was just called like the Rainbow Club. And so there were all the different colours and I would write out so people would choose what colour of the rainbow they wanted to be in and what each colour represented. And they would comment on that diary entry to be in that club, and then I'd come up with a name that was related to that colour. I love doing that. I love doing that. I never did anything
want to be part of it.
I want to reinstate it.
Yeah, can I join?
Yeah. And there was something else as well that's so me and my sister used to like set up a restaurant for my mum. So she'd be out at work and we'd cook her dinner, and then when she'd come home we'd have the table with the tablecloth and that we'd draw little menu cards out and do all of that. Yeah. So well, I am more creative than I think I am, but I think even now I'm still like, oh yeah, maybe I am. In terms of lists versus worlds, I definitely both. Like I'm a very listy person. Like our podcast preparation document brings me so much joy.
Same.
It's so organized and beautiful and wonderful. And yeah, it really does bring me a lot of joy. But yeah, I feel like I'm just starting to discover the world building as well. Yeah, it just feels exciting to kind of have that as another resource.
Yeah. Well, in order to create something creative, then you have to have the imagination in order to do that in the first place anyway. So when we're doing something creative with our hands, when we're physically creating something creative, then that has to have come from somewhere. Yeah. And I think being creative of thought, and so many people experience really rich internal worlds where sometimes our inner worlds are better than the outer worlds, which is something that I struggle with. If you are someone who is, it comes back to the C's again, curiosity, creativity, and being open to experience, I think you're more likely to be highly imaginative. And I know for myself that I am very much a storyteller in the way in which I think. I am very visual, as you were saying. Metaphors come to me all the time. The way in which I think about things is often through a metaphor that has played out in my mind, like a movie or a series of clips, something like that. I can imagine lots of different scenarios, lots of different possibilities, alternate realities in my mind. And because of that, and because my mental imagery can be so vivid, yeah, it just means that you can be in your head daydreaming an awful lot of the time.
Mm. Yeah. So what I was thinking about there was like part of me wants to share like the characters I was talking about and the worlds that I've been creating, and but I also feel incredibly protective of them, and I wonder if that's the same for you. And I guess it can't be the same for everybody, can it? Because I'm thinking about like fantasy writers, or not even fantasy writers, just, story writers at all. They are essentially creating this world, creating these characters, and then putting them out where they will be judged. It's not so much about judgment for me because it's so personal, it's almost irrelevant what anybody thinks about it. But there's also something really kind of precious and private about it. And I wonder if you have that. Yeah, I wonder if you have that at all with your worlds that you create.
Um, I'd say yes and no. I would say some things I quite like sharing about and talking with other people, and some things maybe do feel more private. The things that are more private, I don't know, you've really got me thinking now. Yeah, I guess there are aspects of it that are private, but that's probably more things that I'm trying to figure out for myself. There's the fantasy element of being in my own head, where my imagination plays out through fantasy, through world building, playing out different scenarios, imagining different lives for myself. I mean, in my head, I've probably lived hundreds of different lives. And then I also know that for me, and I know that it's very much true for, highly sensitive and reflective people, imagination and being in my own mind is a way for me to process life and process my emotions and things that are happening. So if I am processing things related to life, then that might be more private because that might just be something that I'm working through on my own and in my own way, when, my thoughts are my own thoughts. But fantasy related scenarios may be the things that I share with people around me, or at least like one or two people, not everybody.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it's quite unusual for me because I feel like I'm not a very private person. Like I'm usually quite happy to talk about all different kinds of things. But yeah, there's something about this that just feel like it's mine. Always like sharing it with other people might change it. So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just fine.
Well, one of the things that I stumbled across recently was finding out that I might have hyperphantasia.
So tell us what that, I know what that means, but there might be people that are listening that don't know what that means. So tell us what you mean by hyperphantasia.
Yeah, well, I only came across it within the past year or so. I had known about aphantasia, which is where people don't have a mind's eye and are unable to conjure images either at all or they're not very clear, which as someone who is highly visual, I found fascinating and absolutely baffled me how people can't see pictures in their mind. But I have a friend who has aphantasia, so we've often spoken back and forth about what that's like. I love the idea that we all assume everyone's inner worlds are the same and that actually
Yeah.
they're so different. Like some people have an internal monologue, some people don't have an internal monologue, some people see in pictures, some people don't. Absolutely fascinating. And I've always just assumed it's the same inside everybody's head when it really
Mm.
isn't.
Mm.
But bringing it back to the opposite of aphantasia, hyperphantasia, is not just being visual, it's being highly visual. Essentially, where what you can create in your mind can feel so real that it's difficult to distinguish from reality. Not in the way in which you end up being confused about what's real or not, but when you have extremely vivid mental imagery, and sometimes I can play through future scenarios that are so vivid, it's almost like it's a memory and it's actually happened,
Yeah.
but it isn't. I can just create things in my mind that can seem so real. So when I'm daydreaming about something really pleasant, I can almost come crashing back to earth afterwards with a great sense of disappointment because it felt like I had it, but I
Yeah.
didn't. It was just in my head. It's just,
Mm.
it's weird to put into words, but I saw a video about it once where, when we do guided visualization and how we might do it in therapy, and we talk about feeling the warmth of the sun on your face, hearing the sounds of the birds, reach out and touch this and how it feels. Some people just can't do that. And some people can when they really think about it. For Fantasia, it's natural. You don't have to intentionally do it. Just the moment you think about something, you think about it in like full HD 3D.
Mhm.
Whereas other people might be able to access that when they try to intentionally and really think about it. Yeah, so I've just found that really fascinating that when I read about it, it really related to how I experience things in my
Mm.
mind. But it also made some things click into place for me as to why I might feel sometimes, yeah, just sometimes more disappointed in. I
Mm.
think I once said in therapy something like, I feel like life is just chronic disappointment, which sounds so negative.
Mm.
Had a good laugh about it. But it is difficult when real life can never live up to what you can imagine in your own head.
Right. Yeah. Like just that sentence, I feel like I can feel the weight of grief. And like obviously there isn't a loss because you didn't ever have it, but there it feels like there is a loss anyway of
Yes.
what can't be. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Definitely. So, like so many things we talk about on this podcast, there is two sides to things and things can be a double-edged sword. But
Mm.
yeah, even though it's difficult, oh my gosh, I love the way I think. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Mm. Mhm. It sounds really busy though. Like I don't know if I have hyperphantasia. I certainly don't have any difficulty imagining things. Although I do remember when I was about 5 years old in infant school, I thought I didn't have an imagination because I couldn't see anything. But I think I was taking it too literally. And I was expecting to be able to actually see with my eyes. um, yeah. So I don't know if I have hyperphantasia, but it just sounds so busy. And my head is really busy. And I'm just imagining having aphantasia and also no inner monologue. And I'm just imagining that it must be really peaceful inside that person's mind where there's not so
Yeah.
much of that going on. I wouldn't swap it, but maybe a switch every now and again to just turn off the busyness would be nice.
Yeah. I'd
Um,
be interested
but
to know if it can be busy but in a different way that we can't
yeah,
conceptualize. It'd be, yeah, interesting to know.
Uh, I love. Oh, that was interesting. I was going to say I love being creative in my mind. So I feel like this
Ah,
creative piece is kind of integrating a bit. But yeah, I love being creative in my mind. I love the way that my mind thinks. I love thinking in pictures. I just think it's so helpful. I think it's brilliant for tapping into stuff in people's unconscious. And it can sometimes be like more revealing than you might expect or even want it to be. But it's such a helpful tool. I think like therapy is great for lots of things, but if you don't work creatively, then you're kind of limited to words and
yeah.
what you can do with words. And there are so many things. Like, think about being in love, like falling in love. Loads of people across many, many years have put into words that feeling, but it can't quite catch it, can it? There's something wordless about that. Whereas I think working in pictures or actually doing some physical artwork can be really helpful. I just did a painting for my therapist the other day because I was struggling to put into words something that I was trying to communicate to her. And yeah, that was really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, bringing creative elements into therapy is really important because so many people, we can't access everything with words.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's difficult to describe a feeling or just something that's going on in our inner worlds in a way that sometimes we can access through
Mm.
creative methods that you do not have to be good at. You can draw a stick figure, it can be a section of a piece of music or something someone else has managed to put into words and lyrics or
Mhm.
poetry or something like that. The human psyche is just incredible, isn't it? And we need to have lots of different methods for
Mm.
accessing it. But I think if you naturally are someone who is more creative in thought and things can come to you in different forms and different shapes and way of explaining things, then
Mm.
I do think it can be easier to understand yourself and you can find it easier in therapy.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the main things that I do in therapy is I get people to imagine their inner critic voice as a character. And sometimes
Mm.
I'll get them to draw it out. Yeah, I think I said a couple of episodes ago about having like a collection of them in my head. And I was like, I can see them all like in a little group. And that can be so helpful to really be able to separate out like what's me and what's this voice. And I do that with lots of different parts, but more consistently with the critical part.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do similarly with emotions and also with the compassionate part as well. Yeah, anything like that can be really helpful. But
Mm.
being able to do things differently, tackle things from a different perspective, think outside the box, imagination really does help with problem solving, finding different solutions to things, and coming up with new ideas. All of the new technology and developments and scientific discoveries, were all initially born out of people's brains, being able to imagining something and then making it real.
Mm-hmm. That blows my mind. Like everything that exists was, well, maybe not everything that exists. Like as soon as that sentence left my mouth, I could see this plant out of the corner of my eye, and I was like, that wasn't that wasn't someone's imagination. Yeah, lots of the things that exist, started off as just an idea in someone's head. This podcast was just an idea.
Yeah, just an
Yeah,
idea, and now it exists in reality.
yeah.
Yeah. So there are many things that we might think about that we then realize that we make it real or we might pursue it. And then there are many things in our mind that can stay fantastical. But
Mm-hmm.
we might still have had a lot of joy thinking about that, creating a reality within which it does become real.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, there can be the disappointment sometimes that comes from daydreaming, but there can also be a lot of joy that can be found in daydreaming. And I think aspects of it that I find regulating.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point about, I might have lost the word that you used, but about the possibilities. So the joy that comes with daydreaming, I feel like it can open up possibilities as well.
Mm.
My mind's flipping back to what you were saying about like creativity of thought. And I almost want you to tell me what you mean when you say that. Because I'm thinking about a quite determined part of me. And I think that part can be quite imaginative as well. Will turn things around and around in my head until I can find a solution to something. I'm not just going to give in easily. So yeah, there can be disappointment if there's this imagining this world, this future, and then, like you say, back to earth with a bump, and it can't be. But there is definitely that positive side as well. That this time spent imagining and being curious and creative and all of that can be a real positive thing. It's not just, daydreaming's really dismissed, isn't it, as childish, I think.
Yeah, it's like,
Childish, like a waste of time, or,
yeah,
yeah. But
yeah,
actually, it feels like a really important part that people need space to reflect and ponder and consider. And how do we let all of the stuff that we have in our mind, in our unconscious mind, be able to be like turned over until it becomes something that we can bring to life?
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And I'd add to that, and also not bring to life, but have enjoyed the process anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I have very much learned that I take so much enjoyment in planning to do something,
Mm-hmm.
even when I never actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
I've enjoyed planning to do it. But
Mm-hmm.
that's where the enjoyment, like, oh my gosh, my partner will tell you, I have planned for us to buy a woodland and live in a lodge. And I can tell you, well, I've got a list somewhere of all the legal things I'd have to do in order to be able to do that. I have dreamed about us living on a canal boat and building a tiny house, doing up a van and going off traveling. There are several countries that I fully mapped out what we would need to do to move there. And so this all starts in my imagination, where I'm then almost playing out the life that I would be living in these places, which is, of course, always through the rose tinted glasses of how amazing it would be. There are no problems in my imagination. It's all amazing. And I play it out so much that it feels like such a good thing, or how happy I will be if I then do that. And I play it all out. And then it leaks into real life where I actually start researching and looking at what you would have to do and what the logistics are. And usually real life ends up ruining it, because you can't just buy woodlands and do whatever you want with it. You have to have planning permission. And if you want to get water to the property, that's going to cost you tens of thousands of pounds. So reality usually comes in and stomps all over my dreams. But I've never followed through with those dreams. And I used to carry shame about that because I used to feel like I was somebody who says they're going to do all these things and never does any of them. And I
Right.
felt like it said something negative about me that I had all these dreams that I never did.
Hmm.
Whereas in reality, I learned that actually many of the things I've dreamed and wanted to do, I have then done. This is less about that being definitely what I want to do and more
Hmm.
about the enjoyment that I get about creating different lives for myself in my mind.
Right. Yeah. And you said about not necessarily bring them to life, but actually, even if you don't bring any specific plan to life, what I wonder about is, so when you've done this plan and it's made you really happy and you've gotten a lot of enjoyment from it, what happens to that joy when you come back to Earth and you've enjoyed it? So you're in a good mood and you're happy, and that's going to have a positive impact on your relationships, and who knows what other bits of what bits of that plan could come to life in a different way. Or yeah, it feels like you've created joy. You've created joy that is real life, even if the plan itself isn't.
Yeah, no, yeah,
Mm.
yeah, that's really true. That there's something has been born out of that that then has
Mhm.
fed into real life. And yeah, my partner always says once I've stuck with one idea for 6 months, then he'll commit to saying yes and doing that idea with me. But yes, to date, nothing has lasted as long as 6 months. I'm usually on to daydreaming about the next thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, that is where you're right with what you said before about daydreaming being positioned as a waste of time, because this just goes back actually to what I was just saying. Because we live in productivity culture and under capitalism, everything that you do must have a use. It must be useful and it must produce something.
Hmm.
And unless you're dreaming about something to make it a reality, quote unquote, not useful, not
Yeah.
a productive use of your time.
Yeah.
And I think that's then where the message comes from about, yeah, ultimately about it being a thing to not do or do less of,
Mm.
rather than actually some of us get so much from allowing ourselves to daydream, to create in our minds. And sometimes because it might be regulating, might bring about really nice positive feelings, we might find it fun.
Hmm.
And sometimes, I've realized I've certainly used fantasy as also a form of escapism when the real world is tough and it's difficult. It can be, yeah, nice to actually have a place you can retreat to inside your own mind that
Yeah.
supports you during those difficult times.
Yeah, yeah. Just it sounds so helpful. And the word radical is in my head. To daydream is like a radical act against capitalist culture, productivity culture. And therefore, I'm all for it.
Yeah, and I
Mm.
really do believe that staying connected with your imagination means you're
Mhm.
more likely to also then to be connected to joy and playfulness. I talk a lot about how we feel about the importance of play
Mhm.
and awe and wonder, and sometimes also some of those more childlike qualities that just feel really good.
Feels like there's an important difference between childish and childlike.
Mm.
I often try and point this out to people that I work with, that being childlike doesn't mean being childish.
No, childlike to me, the word that comes to my mind is free.
Mine's
Well,
play. Mm.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, I think to play involves a certain amount of being free, being able to let go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same with awe and wonder and
Mm.
yeah, and all of those things. So, yeah, you're never freer than you are within your own head, I guess.
Yeah. You'd hope. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you'd hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just think that's so important. And I don't think we talk about it enough. And I don't think society talks about it enough. And of course it doesn't, because, like you say, we're constantly pumped with a media that is trying to reinforce making money and being more productive. But I think fun and creativity and play and freedom are essential parts of feeling emotionally and psychologically well. There
Yeah.
has to be time for that. There has to be time for expression of feels like life force. I think that's what it comes down to for me is about life force. You know, so when I think
Yeah.
about all of these different plans that you have and all the worlds that you're creating, part of the question for me is like, what is it? Yeah, what is it about you that's being expressed through all of these different worlds? And you're unique. Like no one else will ever create that world. It's yeah, it feels there's something
Yeah.
almost magical about it.
Yeah. I certainly know that because my therapist has said something before that she said something like, I could have 1,000 lifetimes and I still wouldn't do everything that I would want to do within those 1,000 lifetimes. So I think I feel so constrained by the way life is
Yeah.
and the fact that it's so time limited. So
Mm-hmm.
we cannot just go and do whatever it is that we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even mean that in an entitled sense, like we should be able to do whatever we want to do. But you
Yeah.
know, right now, if I wanted to move to Botswana and research elephants, which is one of my dreams, is it possible? Like, yes. Would it be really, really hard to do and therefore end up being quite unlikely to be able to do? Like, yeah. I think the way that life is set up, you don't really have much choice over. You're born, you go to school about 4 or 5, you start to learn all the things the government tells you that you should learn about. You memorize a bunch of facts just so that you can pass your tests. At that age, you're supposed to know what it is that you're passionate about and want to do for the rest of your life and what's going to bring you money so that you can then join the workforce and be in the workforce until you retire. And then you get your life back at the time when all your health starts to decline and you can't really do very much. That sounds very cynical, but I feel like that's just the facts. That is what is laid out in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
There is no room in that for real exploration, for that much choice, to change your mind, to do loads of different things that you're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Time just suddenly flies by. And there are some things that if you wanted to do, you needed to have started when you were younger.
Yeah.
You know, you
Mm-hmm.
can't decide at 50 you are going to try and become a Premiership footballer.
Yeah.
There is no way right now that I would be able to become an astronaut. I mean, for many different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So, because everything is so limited,
Mm-hmm.
if you are somebody that has so many things that you think are really cool, really interesting, that you'd love to try your hand at, that you would like to learn, that you would like to gain that skill, that you would like to see what working in that job is like, or living in that country is like, or having this lifestyle or this lifestyle. Yeah, there aren't enough lifetimes and there isn't enough freedom or choice or flexibility to be able to do those. And I think that is where my imagination comes in,
Yeah.
where, well, I will live these lives in my head then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Because otherwise, I'm just left with what the disappointment and despair that this is your lot, do you
Mhm. Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I just had a flash of that despair with you there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Sorry,
Fine.
everyone.
Yeah. And I'm just trying to think about how I experience that because I think it is different to what you're saying, but I also really relate to the idea of, yeah, having far more ideas about how I want to live my life than I have years in which to live them. And yeah, I guess like you say, versions of me that I can no longer be because I've made different choices. And that's not to say that I'm unhappy with the choices, but there are parts of me that would want to try different ways of living that are no longer open to me. And I think that gets worse as you get older as well. Like more and more doors close, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe some other ones open as well that I'd never even thought about. That feels important to mention. But yeah, I suppose so. Listening to you talking about that also makes me think about storytelling. So partly I was thinking about, I think part of the reason that I love to read is because it offers different worlds, and I often feel so sad at the end of a book, and there's no more of that character's story, and there's no more of this world that I've just been walking around in with these characters. But
Yeah.
also moved me on to thinking about storytelling as a way of understanding the world. I think that if we just think about children and the books that we read to children, there's so many stories about what it's like to be a social being in society, things that they may not get introduced to in their own little pocket of the world that I think so again, I think that's like magic as well. Like someone's had a spark of a thought and then like captured it on paper and then sent it around the world. And now you're reading somebody else's thought.
Yes.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And also that those thoughts have the power to change the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the whole element that can stay fantastical. There's the part that supports you with your own regulation on a day to day basis. There's the part where you get ideas that you do then actually turn into reality, create, or live by. Yeah. And then there are those ideas that genuinely have gone on to shape the world around us, change the way people view and think about things. It's interesting actually, because I just read an article this morning where a bunch of authors had decided on what the most life changing books were that they'd ever read. And, it was kind of a list. And I was just reading through the list and I was curious about what it was about those books that had such a profound impact on people. But it just comes back to, well, it just makes you think, what would the world be like if we didn't have really imaginative people in it?
Boring. It would be boring.
Yes.
We'd be taken over by the list people.
Oh, the list people. Yeah, the list making people. Yes, no, it definitely would be boring, and there would probably be hardly any real advancements. We maybe would be very behind from where we are now in many different ways. But I like what you were saying about storytelling because, well, we all tell stories about our life and make stories out of the things that we have experienced. But I think when we're really imaginative, we can really use storytelling to really understand and process the things that we have experienced, sometimes in a way that then is deeper than without that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the modality of therapy that I'm training in at the moment, and one of the central features of that type of therapy is the idea that we have a script, that we have
Right.
created a script of our life to make sense of what's happened to us, and also to predict how the rest of our life might go. Which is great if you've had a really positive experience and you've written a positive script for yourself, but can be problematic if that script sets you up for a tragic ending. And then the therapy is about, how do you change that? How do you change that story that you're telling yourself, about other people, about the world, and what's possible for you?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Anytime that we're able to challenge our own narrative can be really helpful. And I think that is where storytelling can occur in a way that both long term does not help us or long term very much helps us, depending on the meaning that we make out of any given experience, especially if we go through something negative, but we come away with a more grounded or positive way of making meaning out of that versus one that's more negative or destructive. And yeah, it can make a real difference.
Yeah, it really can. It really can.
I've really enjoyed the conversation today, talking about something that, yes, at times can make life difficult, but also there's so much joy to be found in having such a rich inner world. And yeah, and just being so curious about the world around us and how that then translates into the way in which, we think about things and explore things within our own mind. Yeah, I just find it really fun and I really enjoy listening to other people's own inner worlds and what it's like in someone else's mind. Because for all the research that we can do, for all the questions that we can ask people, to date, there is no way to really be in someone else's head.
Yeah. So as we're coming to the end, what I'm really aware of is how much of a good thing this can be. And even though there is that relentless message that daydreaming, imagining, pondering, whatever can be a waste of time, that actually it offers so much. And yeah, when you were saying about what would it be if we didn't have this, like we'd have no films, we'd have no books, we'd have no plays, we'd have nothing. We'd have nothing. Yeah, I think there is a slight edge where this could tip into avoidance, like avoidance of,
Yes.
and maybe that's something that we can revisit in a future episode. But yeah, I think if this is something you do, then let it be. Let it be. Enjoy it. See if you can notice all the positive things that it brings to your life. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely agree with all of that. There have certainly been times where I have used my own imagination to survive. And in that regards, I'm not talking about that as being a negative thing, as actually being a thing where, no, that's actually helped me survive like really difficult times. I think it can be important to check in. Are we using it to avoid? I guess it's similar where escapism in and of itself isn't a bad thing.
Mhm.
But if we're escaping a lot, of course, then that's something that we would need to look at, especially if we're trying to avoid looking at certain things in the real world. But yeah, on the whole, I think I feel really grateful that my brain works in this way. And it's quite nice to be able to say that.
Yeah. Yeah, I really agree with you there.
If you've ever been told you're too imaginative, too dreamy, too in your head,
Maybe what they really meant was that you see possibilities they can't.
imagination is how we create stories, art, ideas, futures, and sometimes how we survive difficult seasons of life.
It's not childish, it's human.
Next time, we're diving into Too Intentional to Rush, slow living, resisting hustle culture, and choosing peace in a world obsessed with productivity.
We'll talk about the pressure to move faster, do more, achieve more, and why slowing down can sometimes be the most radical choice of all.
But for now, we'll leave you with this.
When was the last time you let your imagination wander without trying to make it useful?
And what might open up in your life if you allowed yourself to be a little less ordinary?
That's all from us today. If this episode made you feel a bit less alone, the best way to help us reach more people is to subscribe, rate the podcast, and follow Too Much Apparently on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
Those simple clicks help other sensitive humans find us when they need it most. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon.